But transitioning into my next topic, and I think we're gonna try, or at least I am gonna leave Cade Cunningham out of this discussion. It's the Detroit Pistons player with the most pressure heading into next season. Obviously, there's veterans on this team that are probably going to get traded. I don't think there's a lot of pressure on them, but there's also some young players that are really going to try to establish themselves as long-term pieces to this team. So if we're going to leave Cade Cunningham out of this discussion, because we know the pressure that comes with being the number one overall pick and the hype that was built around
And the
him.
number one guy in your team.
Yeah, and the number. So is there anybody else you think that has a lot of pressure on them for the Detroit Pistons heading into next season?
Killian Hayes. I think that's always a name you got to bring up when it comes to pressure. He potentially lost his job with the signing of Marcus Sasser. Marcus Sasser dropped 40 points in the freaking summer league.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
This guy is great. Like I said, I think Marcus Sasser is a potential sixth man of the year. I think that's his ceiling. I think Killian Hayes, Marvin Bagley is probably going to get traded regardless. There's just not enough space for him. But I'd say maybe on the starting lineup, or one of the more higher up on the lineup list, Isaiah Stewart just got a payday. I think he has a little bit of question marks around him relating to his game. I mean, I don't believe he's one of the better defenders on the team. He is developing a 3-point shot, but I mean, we don't really have anything to base it off of. I think there's a lot of question marks around. It's really the guys that you have a lot of question marks around. James Wiseman. James Wiseman, I think, has a lot of pressure. I mean, you got a really young player in Jalen Duren who plays pretty similarly to James Wiseman. I mean, Jalen Duren's more of a get in the paint and bully him, where James is starting to, but I think he's trying to develop into a 3-and-D guy. But who knows? I think those three names, Killian Hayes, Isaiah Stewart, and James Wiseman, are the three players. I'd say three young players because like we said, veterans never really have the pressure on them. But yeah, those are definitely the guys I'd say that have the most pressure.
Yeah. So out of those three guys you named, you mentioned Jalen Duren. To me,
James Wiseman.
Yes, you did mention James Wiseman, but I'm looking at Jalen Duren as a guy who you essentially traded Jeremy Grant for. And Jeremy Grant, he wasn't an all-star for the Pistons, but he was the next best thing to it. He was playing at a very, very high level. So essentially, you flipped Jeremy Grant and you got Jalen Duren out of that. And to me, when you look at the last Detroit Pistons championship team, you had a guy in Ben Wallace who was so important to that team in the middle. I think Jalen Duren needs to be that for the Pistons. He has to be the Pistons defensive anchor. And I was listening to the heavyweights, and they were talking about this, the pressure on him to be that force in the middle, to be that rebounder, to be that rim defender, to be that lob threat. I think Jalen Duren has a tremendous amount of pressure on them because right now, James Wiseman could prove to be the center of the future. But to me, I think it's Jalen Duren right now. And I think he's going to have to be that guy, that defensive anchor for them. And I think there's a lot of pressure that comes with that. I know he's young. We've seen him trying to develop a jump shot in the summer league, but I just think if this Pistons team, they have to get better defensively. They were atrocious defensively, and I think he's going to be at the forefront of that. And I think if this team is going to have a championship ceiling, Jalen Duren has to be a big part of that. And I'm not saying he has to be a guy who can consistently shoot a jump shot. Like I look at a guy like Bam Adebayo. To me, he is the perfect center in today's NBA for what he can do. He can dribble the ball up the floor, can shoot the mid-range shot. If Jalen Duren can ever become that, that's great. But I don't necessarily think he's going to be able to be that, a guy you could put the ball in his hands and he can create offense. But to me, he has to be this team's defensive anchor and kind of follow in the footsteps of guys like Bill Laimbeer and Ben Wallace and even Bob Lanier. I don't think he's ever going to reach that level, but I think if he could ever reach maybe an all-star level, but I think he's going to be very, very important for the Pistons' future.
Yeah, and I can definitely see pressure being on Jalen Duren, but you got to remember he's one of the youngest guys in the league. I definitely think there is somewhat pressure on him, but I actually think contrary to what you said, I think he can lead a team offensively. I do think. I mean, he's a really young untapped player. I think that's one of the benefits of being on the Pistons is that he's such a young team that you can go that players we trade for young players like James Wiseman and RJ Hampton to see if they can develop. And I mean, some work out, some don't, but I think Jalen Duren does definitely have the potential to become an offensive powerhouse. I mean he's good. I mean there's no questioning that. It's just his development and the way he develops through the process of well, especially being under Monty Williams. I think three players that are gonna boost in their development are going to be Jalen Duren, Killian Hayes, and Cade Cunningham. And I think they're all three are going to have just such a stellar year.